Zero. Good morning.
Good morning. It's Crystal Gale.
Good. Are you in Florida?
No.
Back.
Yeah.
That's sad. Come back to 33 degrees and no snow.
Oh no, I'm not coming back before it gets nice.
Oh, you are still in Florida?
I am. I actually was talking yesterday to a seller of a property I got on the coming soon, and we were talking about hitting the market actually a few days ahead of schedule. And I said, let me look at that weather because I don't want traffic to be impacted by the weather that y'all are supposed to be having. So
Right? We didn't get anything. It rained.
that's good because I thought you all were going to get snow. Is that right?
Yeah, we had a winter weather advisory. We were supposed to get up to 4 inches and it never even got cold enough to snow.
Praise the Lord.
So yeah, I'm over it. I'm ready for lake weather. So
Yeah.
all right. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. Okay, so today we are talking about getting to the close. So in the last two sessions, we covered making and receiving offers and negotiating tactics. So today we're going to move our focus towards the sales process post-offer. So anybody have any lovely news you want to share? Anybody tell me something good? Nobody? Nothing great happening to you?
I need Sydney to sell my listing Friday.
Okay. Did Sydney go show your listing on Friday?
Hey, I'm trying. I am trying.
Girl, I get it. I got your second showing. My seller was happy with that.
I do need to call you later though with some questions though, so I'll be calling you here after a while.
Sounds good, honey.
Great. That's awesome. Showing houses is a step in the right direction, Sydney. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Which it reminded me, I need to tell my people their appraisal is today. Is today. Yes. We made it through the inspection process. I didn't think we were gonna. Thought the roof was gonna be a deal breaker, but we made it through. Okay. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about getting to the close, because that's how you get paid, right? When you get to the close. And everybody likes to get paid. So we have today and tomorrow our last two Ignite sessions, and then we're done. It has been very nice, but I'm ready to get back into my normal 9 to 11 stuff. So this session is about getting to a successful close, because it's true that not all deals make it to the close. I'm sure Crystal has some horror stories about deals that fall apart at the last minute. So the best tactic, right?
I just had one that fell through 2 weeks ago with an agent in their office at the final walkthrough.
Oh my gosh.
It
What
happened.
happened at the final walkthrough to make it not close?
Vacant property, and we had come through the cold snap. You remember several weeks ago we had that cold snap.
Yep.
And finally they turned the heat on for the first time, and the walls were starting to sweat because of the extreme temperature change the minute they kicked everything on, and it spooked them. And we had 3 different concessions we were willing to offer, and they literally walked after it took us an additional 7 weeks to get to the closing with delays on their part. So it happens. That's why you gotta have a pipeline, guys.
Yes.
It
And
rolls off your back. A little $5,000 closing rolls off your back when you got 6 other deals that are sitting there in queue.
yeah, absolutely. And you don't count on any commission until it is actually in your bank. Just for that reason, because it could be day of and you're like, I'm going to get paid today. I'm going to go do this, this, and this. And you just can't count on it until it's actually in your bank account.
Well, I think you have to have a healthy balance of manifesting and believing, because we have to have something to live into, and a belief system where we're always believing that we're always going to be closing. It's just that we build a proactive pipeline in the event that something does go awry with one of our mini deals.
Yep. Agreed. Okay. So we're going to talk about the best tactic, is to be prepared and have mindset of navigating this process successfully for your client. I'm going to move us here. I feel like we're always in the way. There we go. Remember the 6 core competencies we learned way back in the beginning of this. The 5th one is to coordinate the sale to closing. And it is such an essential skill that it made the list of core competencies. So it is to be taken seriously. Now we move on to the rest of the transaction while remembering all the successful negotiating practices that we talked about the other day. And they are very necessary throughout the process. So today we're going to talk about developing transaction timelines so that your clients know what's coming next applying best practices to avoid risk, and identifying ways to follow up after closing to build our business. So start thinking about what we're going to learn today. If you have questions, please speak up because I can't see the chat because it's just me, nobody else is here. So I can't see the chat. So if you have questions or you want to add something, please feel free to just unmute and do that. Okay. Real estate transactions aren't particularly trouble-free. It's a strenuous and trying time that requires all the attention and effort you can command. So remember how important this quote is in the process. It is where the clients get what they need and the participants get paid. So it is a very stressful time for everyone. And if you're new, it's a stressful time for you too, but you have to really keep your emotions in check during the transactions because you are setting the tone for your clients, whether you're on the buy or sell side. So you really need to keep your emotions in check and make sure that you're setting the right tone for everyone. Okay, so just as getting a lead doesn't make the person your client, getting under contract doesn't mean a closing a deal or getting paid. So there's lots of steps in the process where a deal can fall apart. And knowing how to manage the risks will help you take a contract to the closing table. So I know Crystal has anybody else, Sydney or Muhammad, have you guys bought or sold a house outside of real estate? Like outside of being an agent?
Yeah, I bought my house in 2020.
Okay. Oh, that's right. We talked about that.
No,
You've not bought one yet? Okay.
no.
So what did you have to do after you signed the contract, Sydney, as the consumer?
As the consumer, well, for us in particular, we had to handle some things with the deed because it was originally just going to be in my husband's name. So we had to go get an attorney involved in that to get me switched on to it. We had to go make sure all the utilities were lined up properly. I mean, there was a lot.
Yep. So, but it took a lot of people working together to make that happen, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. A lot of stuff that I didn't realize going on behind the scenes until becoming an agent. But it was still, and granted, it was during COVID, so I think that added to stress in a lot of ways.
Yep.
But it was probably one of the most stressful things I've ever gone through. It was rough.
Well, hopefully you can make it the least stressful I don't know how to say that, as possible for your clients. But it is naturally stressful because it's a big deal. It's a big purchase. And I know we've talked about this 1,000 times, but it's the biggest purchase most people make in their lives. And like I said, you have to set the tone. So it takes a lot of people working together to make that closing happen. And as the realtor, it is your job to play nice with the cooperating agent, no matter what is happening. Play nice with them so that you guys can all coordinate everything that needs to be done. I have a house under contract right now, and that agent has called me so many times. He's a selling agent and he's called me so many times, but I keep answering, and he's a very nice guy. I keep answering and keep talking to him because what he has to tell me is important, even though I'm like, oh my gosh, you're kind of wearing me out. So it is very important that you have a good working relationship with the other agents. Because you guys have to coordinate all the tasks and all the things between contract to close. So
I have a couple comments about that.
yeah, please.
I once learned from Kitty Lane, whose team I was on when they were at KW. There's a lot in an equation, and the equation is the transaction. There's a lot that you can't control. So the things that you can control, you better be controlling them. And does it make you a control freak to some degree? Absolutely. But you can give the illusion of not being a control freak and come off with a face of being an absolute control, even if there's some things that are Charlie Brown, the sky is falling kind of thing, without coming off as a control freak. So there's a difference in being in control and looking like a control freak. So it's just a fine balance. I think the other thing that I would lend to that, and I apologize, I'm walking the dogs, it's very windy here. The other thing that I would lend to that is your most successful agents have a lot of systems in place, standard operating procedures. It would behoove you guys to come up with some things in Canva, CTC for buyers, CTC for sellers from your contract to close phase, to come up and say, what does this process look like the minute that we go under contract? So if you have a buyer, you want to, and just as a for instance, in Canva, our team has it. They know what to expect next. So the minute that we have a buyer goes under contract, we know that we need to be getting over a copy of that contract to the lender and letting them know that our clients are excited to lock their rate and that we're looking forward to that due diligence period and the new contract for when the appraisal needs to be ordered by after our inspection period. The next thing that we're doing is we're collecting that good faith deposit. We're scanning it in, getting a picture of the front and back, or going through the Earnest app. And then we're getting with the buyer and saying, hey, here's who I like. Do you have a closing attorney and folks that you'd like to do the title work? If so, we'll defer to them. But otherwise, this is a great group that I like. So there's something you can control. So you're controlling a lot of the outcomes just based on sheer operating procedures that you've put in place for yourself. And as a good buyer's agent, you're getting paid for your efforts on the back end. The standard operating procedure for a seller, just the minute you go under contract, you know, you're letting them know that the next thing in showing time after you mark it contingent or pending is that they're going to start to get a request for the buyer's agent. If it's a inspector that does not belong to Bluegrass Realtors, you'll need to send them a one-time showing code so that they can get into your central lock box. So there's just several things all along the way that you just want to come up with. It's a predictability. This is what needs to happen when this happens. And that will help you not be nervous so that you know to pretty much expect the same order of events every time, no matter which side of the deal you're on.
Yes. And if you need help coming up with one of those lists, there's actually a list it's a template in dotloop that kind of gives you what you need to do after you go under contract. So
It's the checklist, right?
yes.
Yep.
Because even like sending your clients, if you're the buyer agent, you want to send your clients utility information before the day before closing. They have to have that stuff set up. That usually takes a few days for the utility companies to transfer over. And if the sellers shut off the utilities, it's going to cost the buyers more money to turn them back on versus transfer it. So things like that need to be done before you get to the closing table. So for the closing day. Anyway, but yes, those lists are in dotloop. There's a checklist for buyers and a checklist for sellers. So because this is a high stressful situation for your clients, or it can be high stress, your relationship and communication with your client is just as important as your relationship and communication with the other parties that make the deal happen. So you need to have in that checklist, you need to have in there somewhere to check in with people on a regular basis. Check in with the lender once a week. Hey, just wanted to check in, how's things going? Check in with the other agent once a week. Hey, this is our update. This is how things are going. That will help you cement those relationships in a positive manner versus when something's wrong and you haven't talked to them in 2 weeks. Well, now the sky's falling and you're stressed out. So there's a reason why communication is one of our Y4C2 T's, because it's super important. So, move us again. Oh, just kidding. Sorry. Trying to move us. There we go. Okay, so there are deadlines in contracts that are very important. Throughout the session, you'll be drafting multiple timelines, like contract deadlines, buyer timelines, seller timelines, but we're going to focus on deadlines in a contract. So We don't have a sample contract.
Quick shameless plug, next Wednesday, if you want to know what that 11-page contract's going to look like, I'll give you the
Yes.
high point of your buyer outs. I'll give you the high points of your seller outs, the ramification of each, because at some point your earnest money goes hard and fast, and then the seller can relinquish it depending on if A happens, B will happen and the seller gets it. If A happens, the buyer will get it. So we'll
Yep.
go through that next Wednesday. Make sure you guys are planning to attend my class next Wednesday at 9:30.
And I would highly recommend coming in person to that class. I think the effect will be much better in person, and we can have contracts for everybody to like write on and fill in and all the things. And I remember when I first started, I went to one of Myrna's contract classes and I filled out a sample contract and I used that for almost my first year because my first year actually selling houses, because I wanted to be reassured that I was doing the paperwork correctly, because compliance is a big deal. So, we're not going to do a sample contract right now, but it is really important that you know the deadlines. So you have to have a rate locked in, or you have to have your clients have to apply for the loan within 5 days of going under contract. You have to have the earnest money in within 3 days, right? 3. And you need to share that with your cooperating agent. You can just upload it in .loop and share it with them. I always do it in .loop because then there's a record of it. So I would put everything in .loop that you're going to share with the other agent. Another deadline that's really important is your due diligence period, and you make that. So, and I know I've talked about this before, but one thing I do when I'm thinking about how many days we want for the due diligence period, because not only do you have to have an inspector come out and inspect the property, then your clients need to have their eyes on the actual inspection report. Even after they talk about it, they still need to be able to see it and everything he filled out. And then if there's another issue and you have to schedule another inspection, you're going to need time for that as well. So it's really important to make sure that you have some things lined up before you even go under contract. So I call my inspector that I really like beforehand and I say, hey, I'm getting ready to submit a contract. Do you have time this week to come out and inspect this property? And he'll tell me. And if he doesn't have time that week, well, I'm going to extend that due diligence period out a few more days, or I'm going to find another inspector that can do it quickly. But those are some really important deadlines that you need to keep track of. I'm sure there's several others. Crystal, what am I forgetting?
You have your deadline for appraisal order. And then of course you have a range in there, a hard and fast range on page 2. In the middle of page 2, you have a hard and fast date for when it should close by, time is of the essence, or you have a range of dates. And typically that's highest and best protection, because that's bodes well for your buyer, because if you select on page 2 of the purchase contract that it should close by, then you've locked yourself in and they could get kicked out with their earnest money not being returned. So you definitely want to give a range to get highest and best protection to your buyers on page 2 of the purchase contract, and making sure that the lender involved understands in that initial email you send them with a copy of the executed contract. You want to get that lender, just make sure you make it very clear, the appraisal has to be ordered by then, and we don't want to do that during our inspection period, because you want to see how your inspection period is going to shake down before you go costing your people the $500 to $700 on an appraisal they got to pay for up front, and then it goes on as a credit on this final CD to them.
Yep. That's a good one. Actually, there we go. We're gonna go through some of them. Perfect. The other thing that is good to do when you're writing the contract or when you're writing the offer, is to ask the other agent, like, how much time do your sellers need? Maybe they need an extra week or 2. So that's a good thing to do before you even submit the offer. Plus, it makes your offer look better because you've considered everyone in the situation. And also contact the lender and say, can you close in this amount of time? I mean, most lenders can do in 30 days at this point, but maybe they have a special situation and they need more time. So make sure you're asking everyone involved when they can close before you put that in closing date on the contract. So this is just talking about the inspection period, that due diligence period, that's really important. We already talked about that. So who is involved in a transaction? So many people. It's not just two agents and a buyer and a seller, right? We're not going to work with a partner, but we're going to talk about all the people that are involved. So you have the cooperating agent, the title attorney, the inspectors, the lender, the appraiser, the insurance agents. Don't forget to tell your people that they need insurance on their property, because if they don't have it, the lender will put it on for them, and then it's going to be more expensive. Maybe property managers are involved, or tenants, movers. If your people don't want to move themselves, they need movers, contractors to fix anything that needs to be fixed. And usually there's family members involved, like it or not. So I have some clients in Richmond right now that the mother-in-law is involved, and she knows just enough to be dangerous. And when we met and had our buyer consult, the husband asked what the difference between the FHA loan and the conventional loan was, and she started talking about all these things that are not even close to true, but I'm treading lightly because she's the mother-in-law, and I don't want to piss anybody off. But she starts saying these things about FHA loans that are completely not true. Like, you have to have a child to get an FHA loan, and your monthly payment fluctuates based on your income, like crazy stuff. And so I just let her finish, and I was like, when did you get your FHA loan? And she was like, oh, it was in the 90s. And I said, well, I think some things have changed since then, because those things no longer apply. That was the nicest way I could say it without making everybody mad. So sometimes family members are involved, and you just have to do your best to appease all parties. When you're talking about inspectors, there can be many different inspectors, because you have the regular home inspection and then you have the pest inspection. Some people have one person that does it all, but then you might need a radon inspection, and that is done with specialized equipment that the inspector has to have. Sometimes they need a special foundation inspection to see if the crack in the foundation is really structural or not. Sometimes you need a sewer scope. Like, there are so many different kinds of inspections you can do. So make sure that you have some of those people in your back pocket. And if you don't, like when Crystal shared her vendor list, she has names and numbers on there. So make sure that you contact some of those people and tell them who you are, and say, I'm going to put you on my, local greats list, or whatever you want to call it, your vendor list. And make sure people have access, your clients have access to that. So they don't have to think about, well, I need a sewer inspection. Who do I call for that? I've got it right here for you. So now that we have our buyer and seller list, let's think a little bit about when in the transaction these different people are involved. So, I mean, the cooperating agent is involved all the way through, right? The title attorney is typically involved all the way through. They're asking questions for you. They're asking questions to the buyer and seller. They need a lot of information about the property and about the transaction itself. The inspector is involved for that inspection period. But then his inspection report is going to carry you through to the next step of the transaction, because it's going to help make or break the deal. The lender is involved all the way through. They're going to ask, I always joke with my clients and tell them on the buy side that the lender and the title company are going to ask for everything except a blood sample, because it feels, when you're in the process of that and they're like, well, we need this. Oh, we need this now. Now we need this too. And when you're the client, you're like, oh my gosh, I gave you so much of my information. I don't know what more you could possibly need. So make sure you're prepping your people for that. Like, they're going to ask you for a lot of things, and it's going to feel a little overwhelming, but they're doing their job to make sure that you can pay for this house. Your insurance agents are involved toward the end of the transaction, but before the end, because they have to have insurance going into closing day. They're gonna get charged for a full year. If they have a lender, they're gonna get charged for a full year for insurance. And then that, the monthly payment is going to be escrowed into their monthly payment for their mortgage. Taxes and insurance are that way. So they pay a full year up front, and it pays for that whole year. And then by the time they get to the next year, they've made monthly payments into their escrow account, and it gets paid for them out of their escrow account. So they need to understand that too, because when they get to closing and they see that big number for that upfront insurance payment, it's a little overwhelming for clients. They're like, why am I paying for a full year if I'm paying monthly? So they need to know how that works. Yeah, most of the people are involved for most of the transaction. So, all right, so now that we have our list of participants and identified those working with the buyer, let's fill out the buyer timeline. We're just going to talk about the buyer timeline. How about that? So what's the first thing my buyer needs?
I'm not sure how I'm not looking at the screen because it's on my phone, but
Yeah.
not sure what it's asking there. Is it asking the first step, the first protocol that you should be doing with a copy of the delivered contract? Because you guys do know that the minute you get the signed contract from the listing side, you are to serve your people with a fully executed copy of it, attach it as a PDF and .loop. It's not just over the minute you get, yeah, we signed and I shared it back with you. You actually have to deliver it to your respective party in every step of those boxing rounds that we talked about. So the inspection agreement form, you're always delivering a copy back, okay? So that's the first thing. And then you're starting with your lender if that's the case, because they're going to need to lock their rate and get the title order opened up with the title and closing company of record.
Yes. I think that's basically what it's asking for. They actually need, I always give my clients everything that they sign. I download it as a PDF and send them a copy of everything that they've signed with me. So they have a record of all of it, even though .loop like technically shares it back with them. I think it's good to have that receipt of transaction that you have sent them everything.
The best rule of thumb I ever learned regarding .loop, and I've been in lawsuits here with huge commercial horse farms, and a lot was proven in my case of 11 months with the .loop audit trail. Fortunately for me, you want, the rule of thumb that I learned is that you need to be attaching everything as a PDF every time you're sharing its newest version with your client. And then every time that you share something with an agent, you do not want to attach it as a PDF. So in .loop, there will be a protocol where it says they can sign what their title is if they're buyer or seller. And then it says at the bottom of that, do you want to attach it as a PDF? Every time you send something to a client, a newest and latest, greatest updated version, attach it as a PDF. With agents, you do not want to attach it as a PDF. You want to force them to go into .loop because it will pick up on the audit trail that they've opened a document. Why is this important? What if you were offers and they didn't even present your offer and you can't even see it was viewed by the agent in the activity log under that loop? It's so critical that we are not attaching things as a PDF to agents. Force them to go into .loop.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think it's asking, it just wants you to think about what do your buyers need? And honestly, you need to be thinking of this every step of the way. So when you're under contract, what's the first thing your buyers need? Once they apply for their loan and you're through inspections, okay, now what do they need? What do they need to know? What's the next step? So you can tell them what the next step is, so you can anticipate, they can anticipate every step of the transaction. What do I need to know and do? What does the rest of the team need to know and do? And this is where your list, especially that checklist that's in Dotloop right now, this is where that is going to help you so much. Because even though besides the buyers and the sellers, even though everyone, they're all professionals in this situation, you cannot always count on everyone doing their part. So it's your job to ensure that things are getting done for your clients. Even though the lender should be, sending out for the appraisal, just email them or call them and make contact with them and ask them nicely, like, hey, can you give me the appraisal date? Have you ordered that yet? Whatever.
Even
That-
more reason to have a good relationship with your lenders.
Yes, 1000%. And they should keep you in the loop about when the appraisal is and when it comes back. That is the struggle, I think. And some people just get caught up in the transaction and they just forget. So it's your job as the agent to reach out and say, hey, did that appraisal come back yet? Can you tell me where we're at? And if you're the selling agent, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, to bounce off of what's being said here, it all goes back to what you can prove should, with statute of limitations or whatever, things go awry and we get into a lawsuit. You always want to be CYBing. So
Yeah.
every time that you're having a communication of electronic means through text and email with these lenders and appraisers, if they need to get into your listing and schedule a showing time on the property, it's so important to be communicating, because that trail, let's say that we have to think of real estate as a chess match. I always say this: you got to be thinking a next step ahead with the pawn, the queen, and you have to come from a place of contribution and solution. And so the minute that you are getting close to, as an example, day 6 in your the appraisal has not been ordered. You've been communicating. Remember, we talked about there are things in the new contract that will allow your folks to get their money back before it goes hard and fast. There are things that would not allow. And so you have a case on your hands if that appraisal has not been ordered and you're dealing with a very shrewd and hardcore listing agent who is all about those deadlines and isn't taking this casually. And you can prove, say, look, I know our earnest money goes hard and fast, but I have a means of communication and we are working right now to switch lenders, because you don't want your folks to miss out on the deal, but you realize quickly you're dealing with a shithead lender, because some of these people come to you on their own pre-approval letter. And
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with that, in spite of our best efforts to steer them towards folks that we know, like, and trust ourselves, that we know are going to communicate all along the way. Sometimes they come in there with a rocket mortgage or people you've never heard of, and you're like, okay, somebody's dropping the ball here, and it's going to cost my buyers their earnest money. So you need to be communicating all along the way to put the proper addendum in place that allows you time, an extension to get an appraisal ordered, because you're switching lenders now. So be talking to the listing agent all along the way, because they're the neck that's steering the head of that ship over on the listing side, and they have the power to have your money taken away for your buyers, their earnest money, and you become the bad guy. You don't know how, you don't know why, but somehow you became the bad guy. So you always want to be thinking ahead, electronic communication between all vendors and lenders in the transaction, and creating a case so that your people's money is not taken in the hard and fast period if you need to pivot and make a move where you got to switch lenders, and thereby also extend the appraisal order deadline.
Yep. Absolutely. So this is kind of the buyer timeline. So you have, after the contract is accepted and you send it to all interested parties, including the lender, you want to have that inspection. Well, you got to get your earnest money right away within 3 days. And you need to send a proof of that to the listing agent. You need to schedule the inspection right away. Let the listing agent know when the inspection is. You need to put that in showing time. And then, once that you're through the inspection and everything's good and you're going to move forward, you're going to send the inspection agreement form to the listing agent. Hopefully your lender has then ordered the appraisal, but make sure, reach out. Hey, we're through the inspection period. Have you ordered the appraisal? And when the appraisal comes back and everything's good, you know, you're gonna move forward. The buyer, what's not in here is the buyer is going to be submitting lots of documents like we talked about, so they need a little bit of warning on that. And then you are going to do the final walkthrough, hopefully 48 hours before the closing, to make sure that there's no issues. And if you need to do it again the day of closing, you can do it again. I think it's good to do it 48 hours before, because then if there's something small going on, they have 48 hours to fix it instead of the day of, and then they don't have any time to fix it. So, think about, when you're going through this, think about how you're going to communicate the deadlines to the prospective people. Like Crystal said, it's really important to have that electronic communication so that you, if something happens, heaven forbid, you can prove that you were communicating with all of these people the entire time. So make sure you're communicating deadlines, communication of contract to other parties, such as the title and lending, lender and buyer communication, communication of all lists and recommended title companies, inspectors, insurance agents. Hopefully you've done that before you get to this point. Most title companies will allow you to get onto their website if your buyers are new and they don't have any experience and they want to kind of look at their own. You can get on title companies and get an estimate of costs with a property address. So they can kind of search for their own if they don't want to use the people that you have sent to them. Scheduling and communication with inspectors and the listing agent. So when, like I said, when you are doing the inspections, you need to set it up through showing time and make sure that that listing agent sees it and approves it so that he can tell his sellers, hey, you need to be out of the house for this. I got to an inspection on Friday and the sellers were there. And I was like, what is happening? And the listing agent called as I was pulling up and said, hey, they're just waiting for their kids to get home and then they're going to leave. So that's why good communication is important. He called me and let me know that was going on. So some other things you can ask yourself is, when am I reminding the buyers to not make big purchases? When should you be doing that? Throughout the entire process. Tell them at the beginning, and then tell them after they go under contract, and then tell them after the inspection, and then tell them again. Do not roll up to closing in a brand new Mercedes. Do not go buy furniture on a new credit card for your house. Do not do anything. You should be make sure you're telling them that throughout the entire transaction. When are you communicating when to set up utilities and how to do it? So I would probably say within 2 weeks of closing, you need to send them a list. You can get it from the selling agent, or you can look it up yourself. Go to the address, look up utility companies for this address. There's a bunch of websites you can do it through. And then I would verify with the listing agent that those utilities are correct. So when we bought our house, no one gave us a list of utilities, and I didn't know until 5 or 6 months in that we had gas at our house. We never turned it on. So the guy who owned the house before had the bill payment on automatic and didn't cancel it, and he paid it until I switched it. Because I had no idea we had gas, because nobody told me. Anyway, so if you make your own list of utilities, verify it with the listing agent, make sure they have it about 2 weeks before they close so that they can set things up. How am I communicating notice of any holidays that may delay the process? Hopefully you thought about that before you wrote the date in on the contract, the closing date, because if you're, especially around like Thanksgiving and Christmas, if you expect to close within 30 days and there's a big holiday in there, probably going to be mistaken, which is why you need to check with the lender to make sure that they can close that quickly. And if you have a cash deal and you want to close in a week, you need to call the title company beforehand and say, hey, I have a client who's paying cash and they want to close in a week. Can you do that? How do I negotiate the inspection report and when am I communicating this information? That's a great question. There's several different answers to that.
I think it all goes back to education. You want to set a really good expectation during the buyer consultation and show them a sample. I do in mine. I think I showed it to everyone during night session that I taught last week or the week before, whenever it was. You want to give them an example, either of a blank one or one that you've successfully negotiated. If you have one you've successfully negotiated that you printed up as social proof, I think that's amazing, because on mine, it shows $10,000 that we were able to get everyone to sign off on in lieu of the repairs. Why did I show them that? It showed my prospective buyers, who I'm trying to get signed a buyer rep agreement with, that I'm a really good negotiator. I used to shy away from these inspection periods, but I look forward to them now, because at the end of the day, someone who's weak will shy away from an inspection period. Someone who's a strong negotiator and sees the value in it and keeping the liability down post-closing with the statute of limitations will want to help their sellers understand why these things should be fixed, why this is small potatoes. And there's three things at the end of the day I tell the buyer, and it's clearly written on your inspection agreement form at the top. 3 things you cannot ask for. That's cosmetic imperfections. That's a paint on the wall, the carpet on the floor. You should have seen that the day that you made the offer. The offer actually says that after having examined all the contents of the property. I am moving into a binding contract. The other thing that they can't ask for on the inspection agreement form is they can't ask you to fix anything you've already disclosed that you know to be a defect of the home. The exception to that is the appraiser. If he makes the loan subject to closing because of that handrail, even though you're sellers, so it's setting good seller expectations that, look, I know we're selling it as is, but you accepted an FHA loan, and that appraiser, it's just like seeing the judge on a bad day. You want to make sure that he's had his coffee, that he's in a good mood, and that's going to bode well for us, because otherwise he could make the loan subject to some things being repaired outside of the inspection period. And then the third thing that you can't ask them for is to bring anything up to code unless that code item bleeds over into a safety issue or wellness issue where someone's going to die or get hurt. So that's what you want to be telling your buyers, the 3 things they can't ask them for. That's why they acknowledge the seller disclosure. The buyer has initial boxes on one side, the seller is disclosing. And so it's all about disclosure, risk mitigation, and setting proper expectations with your sellers. Look, when we get a contract in, after you've went through the listing presentation, here's how the next few days are going to go. Home, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you a honey-do list. Then we're going to get the home photographed on these dates. Then we're going to hit it. You've got a unicorn on your hands because you're a good agent. You've identified you've got a unicorn on your hands. Got a unicorn on your hands. You're going to get a lot of lookers. You're going to get a lot of strangers in your house. And when we get through the first round, everybody's in love. You accepted a contract. These are the people you want your home to go to. Second round is the inspection. We could be asked to fix some things, and we assume in this moment, for the purpose of conversation, that it's not being sold as is. Okay. They're welcoming inspections and repairs. You need to set a very realistic expectation of the 3 things they can't ask for, and the things that could come up that we've already identified when I walked around and done a needs analysis of the home the day I came out and took some notes on the property when we listed it. So go ahead and future pace them for what's on the horizon. And then when you get hit with the repair list, it doesn't catch you by surprise. It doesn't catch you by surprise. And we want to give, I would much rather folks fix things any day of the week before closing instead of giving a monetary allowance, because you can say that we tried to remedy it. We didn't just throw money at it. And that keeps your liability down.
Yep. There you go. So the next one is, when do I touch base with the lender, title company, or listing agent? Like I said, you need to be doing that regularly. Maybe on Mondays, you touch base with all of them, like every Monday. But don't let it go several weeks without talking to them. These people are all people that are trying to make it work with you. You all have the same goal in mind. So make sure you're touching base with them frequently. The next thing to think about is the possible documentation you will need to represent your buyers. Continue to use your buyer, blah, 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 blah. Do your best to track the documentation points in the correct chronological order. You can always come back and move things around. There are some consideration points on the screen to think about as you think about your documentation points. This is extra. Well, let's just talk about it. So you need to think about, is this an act of communication or a document? To whom and from whom is the document going? This is why I like things in .loop and email, because you have record of everything. And if I'm the buyer's agent and I'm sending something to the listing agent that has to do with the transaction, it's going through .loop, like the earnest money documentation.
Quick word of caution on that.
Yeah,
We are in an email society. It's quick to sit at our desk and email responses and such, and I'm all about it. But what you need to know in KW, like with our KW email, it goes through the Gmail loop. And make no mistake about it, Gmail truncates a lot of messages. So there could be 13 messages or responses when people are hitting reply all between lenders and buyers and such. So be careful, careful. And this is someone who has done this and can appreciate the harm that hasn't yet, and hopefully won't, because I've learned my lesson of offering opinions in emails. You have got to be very careful. Offer factual, offer dates and timelines, expectation and such, but do not offer opinions in emails, because if there's been 3 people responded to it before you see it, you only see the last message in that truncated series of other people that are on the email thread. And Gmail will truncate them, and then you go back after the fact, after you said something and inserted your foot in your mouth, you're like, oh, shizzle. So just be careful of that, okay? If you're going to offer, and get on the phone and do it, like verbally.
Every time I go to text somebody something or email, I'm like, okay, is this going to come back on? Like, is this going to look bad in writing? Is it better if I say it out loud over the phone where there's no, like, it just can't be misconstrued because you can't hear tone in text and email. So that's a good point, Crystal. What is the best pathway for communicating or sending the document to the responsible party? If it has to do with the transaction, it's good to go through .loop. Yeah, just think about what the best pathway is. What is the plan for follow-up after a document has been sent to the responsible party? So for example, if you're sending an offer to an agent, you need to check in with that agent and say, hey, I just sent the offer. Please let me know that you received it. Because sometimes things get lost and the agent has no idea that you even sent the offer. So make sure you follow up with a nice, just checking in, want to make sure you got whatever.
If that agent has not set the expectation of when offers will be reviewed, perhaps it's been on the market a couple of weeks and such, make sure that you're also being a very good buyer's agent and asking for confirmation that the offer has been presented.
Yes. Very good point. And with the new contract, that will kind of take care of itself, because they have to sign off that it was either accepted or rejected.
Well, you say that, and I agree with you. It does say rejected on there, but I can tell you, I was in a deal with an agent in our office, very well-known agent in our office the other day, and multiple offers on a unicorn property. And while I appreciate the phone call, we never got the formal rejection from .loop. So there's that, but you should be delivering a copy to all the rejected ones.
Yep, they're supposed to. Anyway, are there templates for this that I can use or create to save effort and streamline communication across transactions? There's always templates you can use. Don't recreate the wheel. Look for them. Every kind of template you could ever want exists somewhere on the internet, on KW Connect, in .loop. Don't reinvent the wheel. Look for them. Yeah, that's it. I send a next steps email after we go under contract, and I copy and paste it for people because this is the next step after we do this. You need to come up with this, this, and this. And so I have it saved so that I can, change the wording a little bit, but basically it's the gist of it, and I send it out so that I don't forget to tell my buyers anything. So you can make it or you can find it, but there are plenty of them everywhere. So we've already talked about this a little bit, the buyer timeline. I'm not sure why it's going through this again. Okay, so let's talk about the seller side. We've talked about the buyer side a lot. So a seller transaction involves more than just you and the seller. There are many people that you are responsible for bringing into the transaction. It's your responsibility to set high standards and expectations and keep them in the conversation loop. So, let me get to the right page here. So you're going to follow a similar set of steps in the seller timeline as you are for the buyer. The same people are going to be involved. You just don't choose the lender. Typically, you don't choose the title company. You don't choose the inspector, but all those people are still involved in the transaction, and you still need to be willing to communicate with most of them. There are some people on the selling side that you cannot talk to, like the appraiser. You can reach out to you can and should reach out to the lender and verify that they have pre-approved the buyer. But they obviously can't share as much information with you as the selling agent as they do to the buying agent. But you can and should reach out to them initially to make sure the buyer is good to go. Yeah, anything you want to add, Crystal, on that one? Okay, well, when you're thinking about it, you can think about who is working with me directly to help my seller purchase this home.
I apologize. I was trying
Oh, you're fine.
Give my husband a fried egg and sausage sandwich.
You making me want to?
He's got quite the life over here.
Right?
And he's wanting a drink. The only things I would add to that is we have to remember, and I think it's more of a listing agent issue I see. So many times when I hear a listing agent talk, I can tell if they really value their sellers, because you'll hear verbiage emerge like, I have to get the seller's permission, or I have to check with my sellers. But if a listing agent is quick to pipe up and offer lots of answers and you can hear when they're talking. So then you wonder, I understand you're the listing agent, but who's in charge here? We're supposed to be giving each of our respective clients all of their options, the risk, the benefits of each decision that they could make, and allow them to choose. That will, in and of itself, be the single-handed best thing that you can do to mitigate your own liability post-closing. So make sure that you're always getting your folks' permission and buy-in to share information. Don't freely share appraisals with the listing agent, even if it doesn't appraise or it's subject to inspections. Get your buyer's permission, screenshot the portion that is relevant, not the entire thing. If the deal goes awry, and perhaps I like to throw out the possibility of things that do happen, because bad things do happen. But I'll give you, for instance, you have an appraisal that's subject to some repairs. You're under contract for $250. It appraises at $271. It's not good, because if that deal goes awry, you've got $21,000 worth of valuable information you just armed the listing agent with, in spite of a few repairs. So if the deal goes sideways and they're not willing to fix it, and you've shared that appraisal and your people walk, all of a sudden they go back to the market and they can ask another $20,000 more on the list price, with a price improvement that trended upward, because you just gave them valuable information. So don't freely share information. Your buyers should be paying for their own inspections and paying for their own appraisals. And that's their information. You're just guiding them. So don't assume that that belongs to you and that you are okay to share it. Be careful what you share with the other person on the other side of the transaction, because they're not working for your client. They're working for the other client.
That's a great point, because it's not your inspection and it's not your appraisal to share. So you have to get permission. And a lot of times they don't want you to share the whole thing. They only want you to share the relevant information. Like when they are doing repairs, like you can send them the picture that you need repaired, or, you know, the little snippet of the inspection report, but not the whole thing. So that's a good point. So on the selling side, what is the first thing the seller needs to know? Who do the sellers need to know? Or what do the sellers need to know and do? What do I need to know and do? What is the rest of the team? We're going to go through the same kind of timeline with the sellers that we did with the buyers. So on the selling side, oh, let me move us again here.
On the selling side, I'm going to give you an example as a multiple offer situation. On the selling side, make sure you get an executory contract signed by both parties of who you're going to accept before you deliver all the bad news. Do not get the verbal, because it's not a deal until all parties have signed off on it. So make sure, and here's kind of my approach to it. Take it how you will. Some of you younger agents, not younger, but younger in the profession. I think the best advice I ever got is you go deliver the great news. Your folks have signed, your sellers have signed off on that contract. Why is it important to deliver the good news first? It's important to deliver the good news first, because that's going to help give you some momentum for delivering some unfortunate news to 9 other folks who are about to have their little dreams dashed. Okay. Give the good news, deliver a copy of it to the buyer's agent. You're now in contract. Woohoo. Celebrate for a second. Oh, by the way, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, now we have to sign and deliver the 7 rejected. And the minute I hit send and I reject all their offers, I'm either texting them or calling them. Yep. My recommendation, I got a phone call the other day when my people were rejected. You can set yourself up for a lot of questions if you call them. Send out a stock email, send out a stock text to all the offers that were not chosen. Because you could get a text back that says, well, what could we have done better, this or that? Say, look, this one boded well, better for, this is the offer that was chosen based on my seller's goals. And there you go. I'm not this kind of person when I was on the receiving end of the phone call, but a lot of times you will set yourself up. It's like walking into a loaded gun with a pissed off buyer's agent who didn't get their offer and their ego's bruised. They got to go give the bad news to their buyers. They don't take it on the chin quite like certain agents like I do. I understand all in a day's work, but usually if you get that phone call, like the listing agent starts apologizing, and it's the weirdest thing. And then if you have a savvy buyer's agent or a ticked off buyer's agent, now they want to start badgering you and asking a lot of questions. It's best to deliver good news by sending a copy of it in Dotloop and communicating with the buyer's agent that their offer was accepted. That loads the cannon of positivity, because you're getting ready to unload some unpositive news to some folks who tried their very best, took time out of their Saturday to go look at the home and prepare an offer. So make sure you're being respectful to everyone on both sides of it. Deliver good news. That'll load the cannon for some unfortunate mass text and emails you got to do once you have your sellers hit the reject button and sign off on all the rejected offers.
Yep, that's really good advice. I like that. So this is the seller timeline on the selling side. So the first thing you do after you send the contract to all interested parties and it's signed, executed, all the things, you need to mark the listing as pending or contingent in the MLS. That is 1000% a hard deadline. I think you have 24 hours, 24 or 48.
You have 24 hours. And here's the thing that you guys need to know. And it's a real tab on Bluegrass Realtors under your login, the clear cooperation at the very bottom underneath forms. Clear cooperation says that if again, it's the ball is in the seller's court. If the sellers, you've explained the risk of marking it pending or contingent, that they cannot show it in an effort to draw in a backup offer. You can't tell them this, but you're telling them without telling, they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. That's fine if you want to quit the showings. You accepted one. You accepted an offer. But my job is to give you every fighting chance should they not be able to perform or not want to perform at some point and have a change of heart. So if they know going into it and you're telling them, look, I mean, and they want to market pending, they're ready to be done with showings, that's fine. You just need to know the risk. You're again giving them the illusion of control. You're putting the ball in their court, and you can say without saying, I told you so, should that offer not perform or the deal goes sideways and now they've cost themselves valuable days on the market of it being shown. You need to be putting in your agent only remarks and in your marketing remarks. If there's a kick out clause, you got to pay attention to that clear cooperation and what it says there at Bluegrass Realtors.
Yep. Okay, so you have to mark it as pending within 24 hours. You need to inform the seller when the inspection is scheduled. It'll be scheduled through showing time. Hopefully you need to let them know, hey, people are coming into your house to inspect it. So you need to make sure like the electrical panel is accessible. The attic is accessible. I had to put in my offer the other day, last week, that the sellers needed to remove shelves so that the inspector could access the attic because he can't move stuff. If the inspector gets there and it's blocked, then it's, he can't move stuff. So make sure your sellers know when the inspection is scheduled.
Yeah, and just so we're all aware and on the same page, this new purchase contract, there is an actual provision, and I'll teach this in my class. There's a provision in the new contract. If you look at it under the subsection under inspections, it says that the sellers can be charged for a recheck if they have cleared out the stairs to the attic, the breaker box, if the shed is being inspected and they've got a padlock on it. Okay, make sure that you are helping your sellers understand their expectation and provision in the contract, because they have their own things they have to be doing while the buyer is doing their things.
Yes.
It's simultaneously going on.
Yep. And that's something that sellers aren't necessarily going to think about. That's why you're there. That's your job, is to remind them, hey, this is what we have to do next. And then when you get that inspection agreement form back, you're going to send it to your sellers. They're going to sign it. And then they're going to schedule the appraisal. The seller's not scheduling the appraisal, but it's being scheduled through showing time. So you need to let your sellers know when it is. And then if it comes back and it's low, then you probably have to come back to the drawing board and talk about how you're going to handle that. So you need to send the seller the low appraisal response. Hopefully it doesn't, but sometimes it does, and you have to renegotiate a little bit. And then they're also talking with the title company. They're sending stuff. They're sending stuff to the lender for payout, not the lender, the title company for payout. You're sending stuff to the title company on their behalf. And then you're reviewing the closing statements as the listing agent, you're reviewing it. As the buyer's agent, you're also reviewing it with your clients. You're making sure everything's correct, the taxes, all the little fees, all the things that are on there, making sure it's all correct. And then once you close, then you need to go back into the MLS and mark it as closed.
Real quick on the buyer side, when you get your initial ALTA, see, that's when your TRID begins, just so we're all clear on that. The TRID closing law, it's 3 days. It's basically a right of rescission that happens for the buyers because they have one last opportunity to make sure all the numbers work for them. So when they get that initial CD, that's another time that you're going to want to be talking communication to your buyers and say, look, I want to put my eyes on it. Or you tell the lender, I want to be CC'd on that initial ALTA, because the lender should be explaining it to them. But what I find sometimes is these lenders don't. They get late, just like agents, and they don't explain it to them. And then these folks have all these like questions. So you want to be proactive. and you want to be a star, the stars that you guys are, and you want to be explaining to your buyers, look, you're going to be getting an initial CD in the next few days. This is the buttoning up of the loan. It's a final right of rescission, just like your final walkthrough. And this is where the rubber meets the road with the final numbers and what that outlook, that projection looks like. So then I go through and explain line by line the loan origination fee. So while my job isn't to be a lender, I'm there in that moment. I stand in my lane by supporting him and say, look, I'd prefer the lender go over the numbers, but in the event you have any questions, but the few things that you for sure want to be making sure they understand as a buyer of the property, there is what you have is called your lender's policy coverage. That's lender's title insurance that will cover, you're explaining this to your buyers, lender's policy coverage, and that will protect the lender in the event that you default with the title. And then you have an elective coverage called an owner's title policy. This is just a percentage of the contract price, usually, just for round numbers. As an example, on a $200,000 property, you'll have owner's title policy for like $900 on a $200,000 home. Is that required? No. Is regular insurance required? No. But you better believe everybody loves having that insurance if they get into an accident. So while it means nothing to your buyers in that moment, and this is how I explain it to my buyers, I say, look, it's not required. But, you know, you can get in your car right now and drive down the street uninsured. You certainly can. But if you get in an accident, aren't you glad you have that coverage? So I always tell the buyers, look, it's completely optional. It means nothing to you now. But if you plan to sell this property down the road and something wasn't discovered as a result of the title search that was performed when you're buying it, this will help protect you as a seller to give a good marketable title should something be picked up on the future buyer on their title search during that time. So let them know it's an elective thing. It's a one-time premium, and it does not have to be paid on closing day. The rule says that it has to be paid within 30 days of closing on the property. If they decide they want that line item taken off and they'll pay it in the next 30 days, that's fine. Just let them know it's not required. It is optional, but the lender's title policy is required. Owner's title policy is not. It's a one-time premium paid on day of closing as a line item that can stay on the initial CD and the final HUD statement, or it can be paid up to 30 days after closing.
There's a pamphlet you can send them, and you should send them in .loop that explains title insurance a little bit better. So it's important that your people understand what that means, what it covers, why it's important, but it is optional. So, yeah. So communication is similar on the selling side. I mean, you need to make sure you're communicating deadlines to everybody. Communicate contract to the other parties, recommended contractors, movers, cleaners, all the things. Make sure you send the contract to the title company. You're scheduling and communicate with inspectors and buyer's agents. You're sending amendments or inspection reports to the other side, title, lending. Think about the documents that need to be created and signed and exchanged. Make sure you're doing that electronically so that you have a record of it. Yeah. And then documentation points, the same thing we talked about earlier. Make sure that you are sending documents in, sorry, I lost my train of thought. You're sending documents electronically so that you do have a trail. Make sure you have a plan for follow-up, sending documents. You send the document to the title company, but then you follow up with a phone call. Or a lot of times people will send you an email like, I received this. Lenders do that a lot. Hey, I just received this. Thanks for sending, whatever. But make sure you follow up. That's your job to follow up. There are templates you can use for streamlining communication. across the transactions. There's checklists, there's all the things you could ever think of. There's another view of this buyer and seller timelines. Don't forget, Command will automate keeping up with the timelines through opportunities. So I'm going to pull this up real quick because I want you guys, if you have not seen this yet, Sydney and Mohammed, I want you to see what it looks like. In Command when you're going through a transaction.
Hey guys, I got Myrna's called in a couple times. She's probably needing something.
Okay, thanks for being here. We're almost done.
Thanks, guys.
So when you go to opportunities, it kind of makes it idiot proof for lack of better words. So I have a buyer under contract right now. There. So if you click on your people, and we're actually through inspection, now we're at appraisal. So I'm going to move them over. If you look at documents, it tells you what you need to have where. So when you're first doing the consultation, it tells you need to have, well, it's optional, but you should have the buyer rep agreement. And then when you're under contract, it tells you what you need to have in here. And some of them are conditional, but it depends on the age of the house. So the lead-based paint is conditional, but because this house was built in 1971, it's required. I put the earnest money deposit in there because that's just something I like to do, but it's optional. But it walks you through exactly what you need to do. And then when you close, it tells you what documentation you need for this as well. So Command does help you keep track of your progress of your transactions. And you can set up client updates, and you can set up opportunities, or not opportunities, checklists in the opportunities. Did you know you could do that? Let me find. Oh, there it was. Darn it. I don't think I have checklists set up for buyers. Oh, there we go. Stages and checklists. It's in the top right. So yeah, I don't have them set up, but you can set up whatever you want. You can add a stage. You can change the checklists. You can edit these however you want to help you navigate through each phase of the contract. So if you need help doing that, reach out, but it's pretty, I mean, it's pretty simple. So, all right, let's go back to this. I'm gonna X out of that. You can also customize your opportunity pipeline. So you can, there's lots of videos and different references. You can look for ways to do that. You can look in answers.kw.com. You can look and connect through Command. And there are tons of educational tools in there to help you kind of navigate your opportunities. So, anybody have any brilliant ahas?
I didn't realize you could do checklists. That's very helpful for someone who is very OCD.
Yes, yes. And you can send your clients emails through the checklists. Like, hey, this is what we just did. Hey, this is our next step. So, I mean, you have to set that stuff up, but you can do it. And once you set it up once, it goes in for every opportunity. So it's a lot of work on the front end, but then it's there. And you can adjust things as you go. Okay, so now we've gone through timelines. let's talk about risk avoidance. So communicating clearly and often with everyone involved in that step of the transaction. Set expectations up front. Do you need the inspection response the next day? Be sure you've communicated when you schedule that. And stay professional, even when other people don't. Always be the bigger person. Yelling and screaming will not get you anywhere. It just shows that you're unprofessional. That's all it does. So play nice with everybody, even when they make you mad. The best way to control a situation is to lower your voice, and that's so true. Even with kids, when you yell and scream, they start to ignore you. But when you get quiet and crazy and you talk real low, yeah, they like that. They listen better. It's true with adults too. So maintain your professionalism throughout the entire transaction, even when things go wrong. Timelines, communication, and professionalism. These are your greatest tools to succeed in the business. A big part of professionalism is operating as a fiduciary for your client. Yeah. So risk avoidance. Let's be proactive. Together, we're going to think through some strategies we can use to help keep a deal together. So let's think about, where is the deal at risk of falling apart? You guys have any idea?
Typically, it's at inspections. I was always told that's where they always fall apart the most.
Yep. Yep. I mean, they can fall apart in other places, but that is very common for it to fall apart during inspections. During the lending process also, a lot of times if it's a lender issue, you don't have control of it. So keeping it alive is not really up to you at that point. Things you can do to keep.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
But in all fairness, you should be communicating with the lender so that way you can avoid, at least try to avoid getting blindsided. Even if you don't have the greatest relationship with them, you should still be communicating with them to avoid any type of blindsidedness, because that's going to help you. That's also going to help your client out.
Yep. That's why you make that phone call in the very beginning before you even accept the offer. If you're the selling agent, you call the lender, which you should have the pre-approval. So you should already know who their lender is. And you call that lender and say, hey, I just want to double check and make sure that this buyer is good to go. I'm the listing agent and I'm just doing my due diligence. So that's how you can keep it from falling apart before it even falls apart. So what are the best practices for keeping the deal alive? Well, you can price the home reasonably in your listing or on your offer. Don't lowball people so much that the whole thing falls apart before it even starts. You can maintain a good relationship with your cooperating agent to make sure renegotiation is more likely to succeed. You should do that no matter what throughout the entire transaction, even when they're a pain in the tail. You should still be kind and maintain a good relationship. You can make sure you're setting expectations for your clients on both sides of the transaction. So before, like we've talked about before they go into that inspection with the inspector, tell them what they're going to hear. You're going to hear a lot of things. There's things wrong with houses. You will never ever find a house that there's nothing wrong with. Yeah, just set the expectation for them that they're going to hear a lot of things. It sounds overwhelming, but we're going to worry about the big things. And communicate quickly and effectively about any issues that pop up. Burying your head in the sand is never going to help you. Just like Crystal said before, rip the Band-Aid off and just tell them what you need to tell them. And don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Not everything can be handled through a text. That is for sure. Okay. And always be the fiduciary. Act in your client's best interest, even when it seems to conflict with your own. Together, let's see. We've talked about getting through rough patches and setting up your deal for successful close. Unfortunately, some deals still do not close. Like when the inspection comes back with things so bad that the buyers are like, nope, we're out, or they can't afford to fix it. Or maybe it's full of mold and the clients cannot be in a house like that because they have severe allergies. So sometimes you can't fix the deal, and that's okay. Because, you know, if we're living the Y4C2Ts, if it is not a win-win, like if your client has a kid who has major medical needs and they're moving into a house that needs a lot of work and needs mold mitigation and all that kind of stuff, is that really the best place for your client? Probably not. So even if it's not what you want out of the deal, it needs to be what your client wants and needs out of the deal. So that's what they mean in putting their interest above your own. And it's hard to do, but it's not hard to do. If you want what's best for people, it's not hard to do. Yeah. Anybody have any brilliant ahas? Okay. Moving on. Next, we're going to talk about how you're going to turn a transaction into a client relationship. That brings more business referrals and repeat business. So we're also going to discuss how you can lead generate for more business by leveraging client reviews. So we've already covered that all business is new, repeat, or referral business. We've talked about that several times throughout this whole Ignite class. So clients that feel like their experience with you was effortless and special are more likely to come back to you the next time they need to buy or sell a house. They're also more likely to refer others to you and write reviews, which, will help generate new leads. So let's talk about how you can turn today's transaction into tomorrow's business. The first time I ever got a referral from a client, I felt like I won the lottery. And I have to say, the referral was a giant pain in my tail. But it was so kind of my clients to refer them to me because they had a good experience. And that made me feel really good about everything. The command follow-up programs and the touch campaigns you leverage after a transaction, because you're not done with the deal when you close. There's follow-up. You need to continue to stay in communication with those people. Don't have commission breath and just stop after you get your money. It helps you stay in close emotional proximity with your clients so they think about you when they're ready to buy or sell again. So ask for the referral. You will never get the business if you don't ask. At every conversation, ask. Who do you know? My business relies on referrals. If you know anyone that's looking to buy or sell, I'd be so grateful if you could let me know. Throughout the transaction with the buyer or seller, ask them. I would appreciate the opportunity to help your friends and family members buy or sell their homes. I intend to build a relationship of trust between us so that when you think of real estate, you think of me. Because everybody knows somebody who's moving or needs to move. If you wouldn't mind, please tag me on social media anytime one of your friends posts about needing a real estate agent. You could ask them that. I'm going to offer you an amazing service for you to refer me to your friends and family. If I don't, I'm going to feel like I did something wrong and would need to talk to you about how to do it better. So then ask for it at the close also. You are trying to fill your funnel or your pipeline with client referrals and lead generation series for more. So even for future opportunities, in addition to asking for referrals, ask for reviews. I am not good at this, but that is my mission for this year, is to get better at that. So be a strong fiduciary, be the local expert of choice, and exhibiting unmatched customer service leads to great reviews. So reviews can be leveraged on places like social media and your agent site. They not only communicate what it's like to work with you, but they can also generate new leads. When is the last time you bought something off of Amazon without looking at the reviews? Everybody looks at reviews all the time. So the most important thing you can do to get a review is to give value through your communication and relationship. And then ask for the review. Start every relationship by letting the client know that you will ask for their 5-star review at the end. A transaction is not just the transfer of money and property or commission check. Every transaction is a series of opportunities to be of service to your clients. So when you give them excellent service and stay in close emotional proximity through follow-up and touch campaigns, they will reward you with repeat business, referrals, and great reviews. Yeah, do you guys have any questions about that? There's lots of places you can try to get reviews. Okay. So we talked about getting referrals and repeat business. In order to do that, we need to stay top of mind in their real estate as their real estate expert of choice. So you need to have some kind of plan post-close, some kind of follow-up plan. So staying in touch or staying the real estate expert of choice is all about relationships with your clients. So you're going to stay in relationship with a customized 36 touch plan for your new buyer or seller. A lot of these touches can and should be the same as your general 36 touch plan for your sphere. However, personalizing your plan adds more value for those you've closed your business with. So one thing our lender did when we bought our house is he set us up on HomeBot, and it like sends you the value of your house once a month. But it also like tells you if you paid an extra, it's interactive. So if you paid an extra $100 a month on your loan, this is how much you would save and what you would pay off. And if you refinance, this is what you would save. Actually, it says that we would owe a bunch of money if we refinance because we got a good rate. And it tells you like, if you are thinking about renting your house out as an Airbnb, this is approximately what you could rent it out for. And how many nights a year you would need to make it work for you. Like that is such a valuable tool. So when you're sending things in your follow-ups after closing, make sure that you're sending something of value that's going to help them. Like set them up on a neighborhood nurture once a month, just so that they know what houses in their area are going for. Even though they already purchased the house, they still want to see what other houses are going for. They like to think of how much equity they have in their house after they've purchased it, even if they're not going to sell anytime soon. So you can also, I heard of an agent that does housewarming parties for their clients when they close. And then they get more business from hosting the housewarming party. Like they pay for the whole thing. You can do it pretty inexpensively. But that's a great way to set up a post follow-up closing or touch. You can send them a tax form in January. I just sent mine out for last year a couple weeks ago. You can make sure that they just text them once in a while and say, hey, do you need a contractor, or send them your vendor list again. If they're new to town, make sure they know where to go to the dentist and where to go to the doctor and what parks to take their kids to. And there's a great website for kids in Lexington that has all the kid events you could ever want. You don't need to make all that stuff up. You can just send them to the source. Make sure you do a care call, send them equity updates once a year. There's lots of things you can do, but you have to have a plan for it. So make sure you're doing something. And then once you get to later on down the road, most people buy houses every 7 to 10 years. So make sure you stay in touch with them so that when they're thinking about it again, after it all comes again full circle, then they are thinking about you. And if they're going to move out of state, make sure you can refer them to someone. That's just mailbox money. You can send an agent a referral for people and get 25% of the sale just by sending them a good referral. So that is a great way to make extra money and not have to do a whole lot of work. It's also nice to keep in touch with the agent that you worked with. I like to give a little thank you card at closing, just to say, hey, thanks for working with me. And sometimes I do that for the lender too, if I don't have a personal relationship with the lender already. But it's a good idea to keep in good relationship with that other agent, because it's likely that you're probably going to do another deal with them, or you're going to do a deal with somebody who knows them. So, and everybody talks, everybody knows who the agents that are a pain in the butt are, the agents that don't pay attention to details. Everybody knows that. So, don't be that person. Make sure that you are being a good co-agent. How about that? And also it's a good way to build your downline. If somebody decides, hey, I really like this agent, I like their brokerage, I like what they stand for. If you get them to come over here to Keller Williams and you put them in your downline, then you will start to get profit share. So that's a good way to keep building your business also. So some other good ways to follow up with your agent are sending them a handwritten card, invite them to training, send them a book to help them with their career. I'd be careful doing that as a brand new agent, but send them a thank you card, you know, and invite them out for coffee. Yeah. Okay, recaps and ahas. So each day in Ignite, you grow in how you think, feel, and act, and implement what you've learned, hopefully. From learning and ahas, you move toward achieving your big life. And that's why we're here, right? To fulfill our big goals. So how do you feel about your objectives now that we're done? We set out to develop transaction timelines, apply best practices to avoid risk, and identify ways to follow up after closing to build our business. So, are there any actions you're going to take from this class and apply to your business? Anybody? You're going to input checklists into your opportunities, Sydney?
Yeah, I'm actually on Command right now, messing around with it because
Good.
I've been using checklists on Dotloop to try to keep track of everything. So, like I said, I'm very OCD. I plan on implementing it a lot.
Good. And it's easier if you start now rather than going through a few transactions and going, oh, I should have done that. Same thing with keeping track of your expenses. Start now. Don't wait until tax time to go back and try to track everything, because it's impossible and you'll miss stuff. So keep a spreadsheet or however you do it, keep track of stuff now. Okay. We've talked about daily success systems 1,000 times. Hopefully you have something that, some kind of standard that you have every day for doing those things. And hopefully you're doing them to lead generate. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so tomorrow is the last one. And it is planning your future. And you're stuck with me again. I wasn't supposed to teach today, but here we are. So if you guys don't need anything, we're gonna go. So
Thank
if
you, Shannon.
you're so welcome. If you need anything, reach out to me. I'm happy to help. Sydney, did you get a hold of that agent down in Somerset?
I did, yes. I spoke to her yesterday. She gave me a lot of answers, and that's actually what I'm also working on right now, is getting these listings pulled together. I will probably be reaching out to you or even Michael, just depending on what I need help with, making sure I'm getting everything filled out correctly, my verbiage is correct. But otherwise, yeah, she was very helpful.
Good, perfect. Okay. Well, yeah, feel free to reach out if you guys need anything, and I will see you tomorrow.
Talk to you later. Have a good one.
Bye, you too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.